Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near. Between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Welcome to STARCARD Podcast. Let's go to the tarot cam. So I got a couple of Robert Frost books here. Here is a book for children about Robert Frost. It says Poetry for Young People. It's a beautiful book. And I was surprised to rediscover that in this book, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening is not in this book. And if I do my job right and follow my notes, I'll be returning to that comment about this book, probably at the very end. And then I want to show you this book is, it looks kind of goofy with my Post-it note, I know. This is a pocketbook of Robert Frost poems, quite thick. It's got some nice artwork in there. Let's see if I can show you some. Here we go. Yeah, it's real old school. So old school, I mean, maybe you could tell the pages are yellowing. Nevertheless, it's got, some great poems in this one. It's more comprehensive than the one we have down here. Nevertheless, I think I have a window open to share with you about Robert Frost. Robert Frost was okay, so I'm reading right off the computer, everybody, okay? Robert Frost was a 20th century American poet known for his realistic portrayals of rural New England life and his use of American colloquial speech. His poems often explore complex social and philosophical themes through settings from early 20th century New England. A four-time Pulitzer Prize winner, Frost is considered one of the most honored American poets of the 20th century. And he was also the poet who read at John F. Kennedy's inauguration way back in the early 60s. Robert Frost was born in 1874, before power tools, and that would be in San Francisco, and he passed away in 1963. He was born in San Francisco, but obviously he's known for New England. Here I go. I got a string of thoughts I want to connect together here. So I was able to recite the Robert Frost poem at the beginning of the program today from memory because I memorized it when I was in 8th grade. I memorized the poem when I was taking a speed reading class, and this was after school. And this was back when I was a kid in New York, a middle school kid. I know. So anyway, yeah, I memorized it back then. And then what I would do in my previous life as a teacher, I would entertain and amuse the kids as if I was a circus performer. And I would recite that poem out loud that I memorized, 30, 40 years earlier. And they couldn't believe it, but I wasn't looking at any papers, right? So it showed them that they could do it. And not only that, but there was another teacher at my school who had her third graders do it every year. They were memorizing that very poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. So anyway, I got a chance to teach poetry to 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders for an elective class, if you will. And I brought in Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. I brought in a couple of others, like Shakespeare's sonnet. I had one kid in my class. She read a Shakespeare sonnet to her mom for Mother's Day morning. The kids could pick a poem to read. But anyway, the funny part of the story is that this kid, he's a 5th grade boy, and he was riding with his mom to school in the car. And his mom is a school teacher in the same district as me. She works in the high school. Very nice lady. Anyway, all of a sudden, the radio's off and the young boy, the 5th grader, starts reciting Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. And he does it completely. And when he's done, he says, "Oh no, Mr. Breakaway is brainwashing me." All right, that comment's going to come back later. But I do want to reflect. This is like, the state of California's worst nightmare. Here I am, a teacher who's not working with a bunch of time on my hands to complain about education I worked in the classroom for 33 years. I never heard of anybody, going to an after-school class for speed reading. I was lucky that there was another teacher at my school who did that kind of poetry memorization and to remind children about the culture that we have. Certainly we're talking about the United States here. Let me give you a contrast very quickly. I'm glad I remembered this part. There's a story that somewhere we'll just say, Los Angeles, the greater Los Angeles area, more than 1 million people. I don't know how many million people live down in Los Angeles, but apparently there was a school. I read about this in a newspaper. That's how old I am. So there was a school, and I read about this in a newspaper where, it was the last day of school. It was June, and the kids were so happy. And as they left school, they were all singing Christmas songs and Christmas carols. And the whole point was that, this was real spiritual poverty. The only culture they had to express their joy were Christmas songs. They are deprived of the great wealth of music that they could listen to that might be even more seasonally appropriate. We talk about how, well, we haven't talked about this actually, but there was an event that dealt with Sputnik, a Russian satellite from the Soviet Union in the 1950s that, sparked the space race and sparked our desire to learn and to expand our minds intellectually, just, for starters. And then, of course, President Johnson came after President Kennedy, and he had the war on poverty. But it seems like there's been some regression going on. We have, we're not as intellectual. We're not even culturally intellectual. We need to try a little bit harder. So that's why I'm going to contribute and maybe throw in a couple of poems here and there, remind everyone about our rich heritage. We'll be talking more about Robert Frost and writing poetry and reading poetry in a moment. I'm going to check my notes very quickly. I think I'm almost done here. Yeah, here we go, everybody. So a lot of you are familiar with a very popular movie the last couple of years called The Winter Soldier. It's from the Marvel world of movies, right? And the Winter Soldier, he can be controlled through his mind. If this guy his mind could be hijacked if he reads a certain bunch of words in Russian. That's how he was programmed. If he hears these words, it triggers a bunch of things in his mind. And then all of a sudden, he's like a compliant Winter Soldier. What do you want me to do? He's like the anti-Captain America. Nevertheless, that's like soft disclosure. Maybe it's straight up disclosure because, when you're listening to STARCARD podcast, you're probably already aware of something called mind control with a K. And not to get too far into it, there's lots of places you can go to learn about that. But I'm not going to, this is why you're listening to the STARCARD podcast. I'm going to take something that's part of our culture, a wonderful part of the season of October. And here we are, we're reading and celebrating Robert Frost's poem, and I'm bringing in mind control. I'm reminding everybody about what's underneath the surface here. So there was a movie, let's see if I got this right. There was a movie called Telefon, spelled Telefon, from 1977, starring Charles Bronson. And I want to congratulate the filmmakers of Telefon from 1977. That movie was filled with intrigue. They don't make movies like that anymore. But anyway, it was about Charles Bronson playing a KGB agent. He has to come to the United States to track down a rogue agent who's going around calling people on the phone. And he's using the last two lines of that poem, miles to go before I sleep and miles to go before I sleep. And he's triggering sleeper agents to go do, something bad. And so Charles Bronson's got to stop him. So that's a great movie. But again, we're talking about mind control there. And we brought it all back, I think. I got it all. All right. Well, I had fun talking about it. So, oh yeah, here we go. So, yeah, they didn't put Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening in this children's book of poetry about Robert Frost. And maybe, this is my opinion, it's just for entertainment. Maybe it's because, the people who are publishing these books are all, no, we can't let you use that one. We're using it for mind control. So we don't need the kids learning about that. We don't need them learning about planet Pluto. Why do you keep talking about planet Pluto? And why? Hey, Breakaway Ray, stop bringing up Planet Series all the time. We did a good job scrubbing that from everybody's history, and you keep bringing it up all the time. Anyway, let's move on. So I'm of the opinion that poetry is important, obviously, not just because I was an English literature major and a school teacher. I think it's an avenue, and an avenue goes two ways, in and out of your consciousness. You can access your higher self. I'm going to ask the tarot world, and I'm going to invite in the spirit of Robert Frost, if he would like to participate, of course, he is always welcome. I don't know if a 4-time Pulitzer Prize winner wants to stop by my living room, but he is always welcome. I mean, I know I got Topsy the Elephant in here and a bunch of other presidents and all my spirit guides and masters and teachers, but there's room for Robert Frost for sure. So anyway, let's throw some cards. And I would like to invite the tarot world and Robert Frost to, address the concept, the idea of, reading poetry and writing poetry. So reading poetry, that would be like meditation. And then writing poetry, that would be like prayer. So you already got the 2 concepts going there. Let's go to the tarot cam and learn more. I'll get my table set up. That's right, Robert Frost. He was a 4-time Pulitzer Prize winner. Okay, and then writing poetry and reading poetry. This one's gonna fly around if I don't stick it under there. There we go. We'll do that, but then we're also gonna, of course, we're gonna invite them to give us all a final statement. Hey, Tarot World, we'd like to welcome you back and invite in Robert Frost. If anyone could use words carefully to portray an image, well, it would be Robert Frost. He could conjure up New England scenes, even if people have never been to New England before, just with simple language. Robert Frost is a good poet for us to remember here in the 21st century, because as Secret Space Program experiencer Penny Bradley points out, as far as reading goes, most of us in the United States have an average of a 6th grade reading level. I know that doesn't sound cool, Breakaway Ray, but nevertheless, we would all like to read things that, are easy to read, and that who can blame us? We might as well capitalize on it. Let's let Robert Frost and Dr. Seuss and even Flavor Flav make it easy for us, right? They make the rhymes easy. They take after Shakespeare, let's face it. So these cards are for reading poetry and writing poetry. Can we please have a message about reading poetry and writing poetry? And then maybe Robert Frost has a message for us, about how we learn to read and write and how valuable it is. Maybe he has a different opinion now that he's on the other side. I'm just halfway teasing there. Welcome, Robert Frost. Thank you very much for joining us. Here, you have the last word. All right. I mean, this is a small stage compared to the podium when the president's getting inaugurated. But here we go. Starting with reading poetry. Wow. So we start off with the Death card, which talks about endings and beginnings and transformations. But when you do read poetry, it's the end of, the world around you and the beginning of peering into the mind of the poet. Wow. And then I think this card already came out reversed, so I'm going to go with that. But this is the 9 of Swords, which usually represents insomnia and sleepless nights. And maybe that's what the poet is dealing with. But the poet is taking that energy and channeling it in a positive direction. Let me get my magnifying glass. One moment, please. And he or she, the poet is releasing worry. The poet has hope, and the poet is reaching out. And that's what the poet is doing when the poet's writing a poem. I got something on my mind. I'm reaching out to the reader. You can join me in my world. This reminds me of Nostradamus, who would coordinate a place off, in the spirit world where Dolores Cannon's hypnosis subject could connect with him. And that's how she was able to complete those books about Nostradamus. Anyway, moving on with reading poetry, here is the dynamic. The reader leaves the real world and joins the world of the poet. And it's very valuable and precious, but you have to use each word. Each word you have to be very careful, even with the syllables. You can't waste any words. That's right. Every word is filled with importance. And then, nice. And yeah, every word is filled with importance. And then at the end, ka-ching, the machine spits out all the coins. It's worth $1 million. All right. I mean, yeah, you're not going to get rich reading poetry, although for sure it could happen. But you're going to feel rich. You're going to feel rich. Right. So that was a great message. How about writing poetry? Yeah, you think Robert Frost agrees with this? I think so. Writing poetry. Oh, it's the Knight of Pentacles. The Knight of Pentacles talks about hard work, productivity, routine, conservation, efficiency, and responsibility. Yeah, hard work and productivity. As an aspiring poet myself, that the whole thing about poetry being so hard to write, that's part of the draw. That's part of the fun. That's the challenge. That's like the Sudoku of words. So writing poetry is a challenge. You got to crack that combination. Yeah, but when you do, the Three of Cups says you can celebrate. You've and expressed an emotion. You put it in words. You can read a bunch of Shakespeare sonnets about that idea. And then, here's the Eight of Swords. Now, hang on. This is tarot, so this has got multiple meanings. The first thing I want to say is that the Eight of Swords means to me, Breakaway Ray, as much as you can imagine. And I think that that's what applies here. Let's turn the next card to see if I'm right about this. Yeah, I am. Here's the Four of Wands, which is the homecoming card. So if you work hard at it, just writing the poem is an accomplishment worth celebrating. So as much as you can imagine, come home to your higher self, says the Four of Wands. Lovely messages, unbelievable, magical messages from the tarot world, and perhaps even the great poet Robert Frost himself. Let's find out what the closing statement is and go to your readings. Oh, it's the King of Wands. It's the big picture guy. King of Wands, natural leader, visionary, big picture. Yeah, this is Robert Frost. Can I read those adjectives to you again? Natural leader, visionary. He's painting the big picture. And he's giving us the big picture right now about reading and writing poetry. Thank you, Robert Frost. We're all ears. Oh, he's the emperor. He's in control. And by the same token, I would say we're all in control. When we can read and write poetry, what? You want an artificial intelligence to do it for you? There's nothing wrong with artificial intelligence. Why not use your own? It's 2025. Don't give up on your own intelligence yet. And then just remember, we are all being divinely guided from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, says the Six of Swords. That was a delightful adventure for me. Thank you very much, Tarot World.